Italy's Interior Minister Matteo Salvini begins campaigning on the coast a day after calling for a snap election. He's hoping his anti-migrant policies will secure him the top job. Indian authorities used tear gas to hold back crowds in Kashmir following Friday prayers, 5 days after New Delhi revoked special autonomy and began a lockdown of the disputed Muslim-majority region. And global stocks take a dive at the end of a turbulent week amid fears that the trade war between the United States and China is worsening. Those are our top headlines here on France 24. I'm Alexander Orcott. Italy's right-wing interior minister has already begun campaigning this Friday after catching his political opponents off guard during the summer recess with a call for a snap election. Relations between Matteo Salvini's League Party and their coalition partners have been tense for weeks, and Salvini said the final straw was a failed attempt by the Five Star movement to derail plans for a high-speed train link. In the last elections 17 months ago, Five Star won twice as many seats as the League, but polls now suggest that their tally has reversed. Simon Harding takes a look now at the rise of Matteo Salvini.
Many are tipping him to be Italy's next prime minister, but just 6 years ago Matteo Salvini was virtually unknown. Then in 2013 he became leader of the Lega Nord party and transformed it from a regionalist to a nationalist movement. His popularity has rapidly increased ever since. This meteoric rise has been built around opposition to the EU, Italy's elite and migration. It's an argument which has long appealed to his northern support base, but which he is now seeking to export to the more sceptical south, with some success.
I wrote to him, "You've let me down. You did not do for Sicily what you had to do. Full stop." He's from the League. He only cares about Italy's north.
Salvini as well has achieved a lot. Sicily was invaded by migrants. This is not a question of racism, but there are too few jobs available for us. And if we host all these people, there will be no more work left.
Like similar populist politicians across the continent, Salvini says the nation should come before the EU.
I hope no one in this room, all of us who represent 60 million Italians, has any difficulty in understanding the concept of country and national sovereignty. For this, Italians pay my salary to defend our borders and to maintain the security of our country.
Salvini polled below his eventual coalition counterpart Luigi Di Maio in 2018's election. Since then, he's edged out the five-star leader and is now the politician with the highest approval rating in the polls.
Indian police have used tear gas to hold back some 10,000 protesters in Kashmir as residents mobilised following Friday prayers in the Muslim-majority territory. Well, this comes 5 days after the authorities locked down Indian-controlled Kashmir, ending 7 decades of special autonomy for the disputed region that's also claimed by Pakistan. Maria Sofas tells us more.
With Eid approaching, Kashmir's strict curfew was temporarily relaxed by the Indian government on Friday, allowing the majority Muslim population to attend prayers, though only in small local mosques, not the historic Jama Masjid where thousands normally pray every week.
We came here to offer our prayers. It was a big effort getting to the mosque.
Indian security forces remain on high alert as tensions over the ending of the disputed region's autonomy on Monday continue to mount. So far, more than 500 arrests have been made. While sporadic small-scale demonstrations have occurred, police fear that mass protests could easily be around the corner. The near-total communications blackout imposed by India has been dubbed draconian by the UN. On Friday in New Delhi, Kashmiris gathered for silent protests against the revocation of their native region's special status.
If Delhi gets shut for 1 hour, can you imagine the situation? For 7 days, 6 days now, there's no transport, no phones, no landlines, no internet, nothing. No emergencies, no food, no medicines. What sort of a life is this? Are you talking this is Indian democracy?
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has called his intervention in Kashmir an historic decision aimed at ridding the region of terrorism and separatism. He has promised early elections for the Indian-controlled portion of the region.
Chinese state-run media has begun a campaign calling on citizens to boycott companies that have shown support for pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong. The biggest target is Hong Kong's flagship airline, Cathay Pacific. Beijing also ordered the company to suspend staff members who've shown support for the movement. This comes as thousands of people joined a 3-day sit-in at the Hong Kong International Airport. Yana Lee reports.
Huge crowds filled the arrivals hall at Hong Kong International Airport. They're not waiting for anyone in particular, they're staging a sit-in. Hong Kongese protesters hope to inform foreign visitors of their grievances and raise awareness for their cause.
We want them to know that we are not give upping. We are still here to fight for what we supposed to have, the democracy, the freedom of Hong Kong. Hong Kong is not China. We are Hong Konger. Hong Konger, don't give up.
The anti-Beijing movement is demanding greater civil rights. An investigation into alleged police brutality and the resignation of the city's chief executive, Carrie Lam. The embattled leader renewed focus on the economic consequences of the protests this Friday, this after a meeting with 33 business leaders of the tax haven.
We should do what is right for Hong Kong. And at this moment, what is right for Hong Kong, as we have heard all our 33 business representatives told us, is to stop the violence and to say no to the chaotic situation that Hong Kong has experienced in the last few weeks, so that we can move on.
Demonstrations in the Chinese-controlled territory have at times become violent. Police and protesters clash frequently in the dense city. Several countries have issued travel warnings to their citizens, including the US and Japan. Those who still plan on visiting the financial hub this week will be greeted by protesters distributing flyers at the arrivals hall. The sit-in is planned for 3 days, and airport officials say flights should operate normally.
Global stocks have tumbled again this Friday amid fears that the trade war between the United States and China might be worsening. It comes at the end of a volatile week in the markets, where tit-for-tat measures have sent them on a rollercoaster ride. One of the key moments was when Beijing let the yuan slump to an 11-year low against the dollar, leading Donald Trump's administration to accuse it of currency manipulation, an issue that the president said wasn't resolved when the currency stabilized.
We're talking to China. We're not ready to make a deal, but we'll see what happens. We called them on manipulation, and they brought their numbers back, and they brought them back rapidly, and they were able to do that because they manipulate. But that's all. It's called monetary manipulation. Not good. But what happened and what's happening with China now, we have an open dialogue. We'll see whether or not we keep our meeting in September.
Now staying with China, and the authorities have issued a red alert for incoming super typhoon Lekima. The storm swept across the northern tip of Taiwan, and it's making landfall on China's eastern Zhejiang province early Saturday morning, battering it with winds of over 200 kilometers per hour, along with heavy rainfall. It's projected to move up the coast after that. Some airlines have cancelled flights out of Shanghai as a precaution. North Korea has fired 2 more projectiles into the sea, its 5th such launch in recent weeks. South Korea's military said it believed them to be short-range ballistic missiles fired in protest against its military exercises with the United States. Donald Trump said he is not happy about the tests that come shortly after he said he received, quote, a very beautiful letter from the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Well, the annual military exercises have already been scaled down this year to expedite nuclear talks, mostly comprising of computer simulations. Nonetheless, Pyongyang says it considers them invasion preparations. Now, with all the candidates declared for Tunisia's presidential election to be held in mid-September, the race begins. A crowded field will compete to take the mantle left by deceased head of state Beji Caid Essebsi, the first president elected under universal suffrage in the country's history following the Arab Spring movement. Sam Bradpiece and Karis Garland take a closer look.
A well-known face to Tunisians, Youssef Chahed, the youngest prime minister in the country's history, is a front-runner in this presidential election.
It is a responsibility, and I know what responsibility is. I have had 3 years of it in a country that is fighting terrorism, going through a tough political situation, and was on the edge when I took power.
Chahed has positioned himself as a dynamic figure, bringing hope to the young through economic reform. But in recent months, his popularity has flagged in the wake of creeping unemployment and inflation. Chahed created the Tahia Tunes party, the second largest party in the Tunisian parliament behind the moderate Islamist group Ennahda. Abdel Fattah Mourou, interim head of parliament and founding member of Ennahda, will pose a significant threat to Chahed in this election. Mourou is his party's first ever candidate for the presidency. But if Tunisians decide to reject mainstream parties in this contest, there are a number of outside figures who could do well. 56-year-old Nabil Karoui, for example, the businessman is known as the Tunisian Berlusconi by his critics. A populist telecoms mogul, Karoui was leading in some polls back in June. A more established bet is Abdelkarim Zbidi, the sitting defence minister who currently enjoys the support of secular parties such as Nida Tunes. With the candidates declared, the electoral battle begins. Elections are set to take place on September 15. If no candidate wins a majority, a runoff vote will be held by early November.
Anti-government protests in Algeria have reached a 25th consecutive week as student-led demonstrators continue to call for a complete overhaul of the political system. The movement has already succeeded in toppling the country's longtime president, Abdelaziz Bouteflika, and seen the arrests of numerous other officials. But they continue to target a network of other elites, including politicians, businessmen and army generals, who the protesters see as the real power holders in Algeria, who need to go before fresh elections can be called. From October, tourists will no longer be able to climb Ayers Rock, also known as Uluru to Australian Aborigines. The towering Red Mountain has been a must-see for generations of gap-year backpackers and tourists from around the world. But it's also the most sacred site for Aboriginal culture, and the rock's traditional owners have been asking tourists not to climb the rock out of respect. The ban in October will mark 34 years since the rock was handed back to the Aboriginal community. Cami Nedelec has the story.
It's been a sacred site for thousands of years, and it's a must on the tourist trail.
Very hard, very steep, beautiful views over the desert.
But it's a view that won't be enjoyed for much longer, as climbing Uluru is going to be banned. A UNESCO World Heritage Site, Uluru is the Notre Dame of the Arnongu people, and full of cultural and spiritual meaning. The area is covered in irreplaceable ancient wall paintings.
The concentric circles, we do think it represents water, because if you're throwing a stone into water, you're gonna get the ripples from it. And as water is very rare in this place, it also represents important places.
The traditional owners of the rock say it shouldn't be climbed out of respect for their culture and to preserve the site for future generations. And tourists themselves also support the ban.
The government allowed tourists to climb over this rock when it's sacred. It's like if people climbed our cathedrals in France. We understand the ban.
The Aboriginal community says the forthcoming ban is a cause for celebration, not upset, and points out that tourists will continue to be welcome to the rock, just not on it.
I'm going to leave you with pictures of another tourist site from Norwich Cathedral in the UK, which has installed a helter-skelter for the next 10 days. More than just a gimmick, it will give visitors the rare chance to get an up-close look of the building's medieval roof and, according to Canon Andy Bryant, a chance to think differently about the building, life and God. The helter-skelter is the latest attempt by the Church of England to attract new worshippers and follows the decision of Rochester Cathedral to house a mini golf course in its nave. I'll leave you with these pictures. Stay tuned for more news and updates coming up on France 24.